The real reason you can't focus is not what you think. Ethan Carter used to believe he had a discipline problem, that something was wrong with him, that maybe he just wasn't built like those people who could sit for hours and get things done. But every morning told a different story. He would sit at his desk, open his laptop, and promise himself, "Today is different." Yet within minutes his hand would reach for his phone, just for a second, just to check one notification. And somehow that 1 second would turn into 30 minutes, then an hour, then 3. And before he even realized it, the sun outside his window had shifted across the sky and the day was gone. Again, he wasn't lazy. He knew that, because the guilt was always there, heavy, sitting in his chest, reminding him of everything he didn't do, every goal he postponed, every opportunity slowly slipping away. And the worst part was not failure. It was watching himself fail in slow motion, knowing exactly what he should be doing, but feeling completely unable to do it, like his mind was no longer his, like something else was in control, something restless, distracted, always chasing the next easy hit of comfort. And the more he tried to fight it, the worse it became. He would delete apps, set timers, make strict plans, even wake up at 5 a.m. thinking that would fix everything. But nothing lasted, because the problem always came back, quietly, patiently, waiting for the moment his attention slipped, and then pulling him away again, one thought at a time, one distraction at a time, until hours disappeared without a trace. And deep down Ethan started to believe something dangerous, that maybe this was just who he was, someone who starts but never finishes, someone who dreams but never follows through. And that belief grew stronger every single day, until one afternoon, after losing something that truly mattered to him, something he knew he could have achieved if only he had stayed focused. He sat there in silence, staring at the screen, not angry, not frustrated, just empty. And for the first time in his life, he asked himself a question he had never asked before. What if the problem isn't my time, my tools, or my habits? What if the problem is my mind? That question did not give him an answer, but it did something more important. It made him stop blaming everything outside of him. And for the first time, Ethan began to observe himself instead of fighting himself. The next morning he sat at the same desk, same laptop, same phone lying just a few inches away. But this time he did not rush to start working. He simply watched. He noticed how quickly his mind became restless, how within seconds a thought would appear, telling him to check something, anything, just to escape the discomfort of focusing. And that was the moment he realized something strange. It was not that he could not focus. It was that his mind did not want to. It kept pulling him away, over and over again, like a muscle that had never been trained, weak and uncontrollable. And the more he paid attention, the clearer it became. Every distraction had a pattern. It started small, almost invisible, a tiny urge, a simple thought. And if he followed it, it would grow, stronger, leading him further away from what truly mattered. But if he ignored it, even for a few seconds, it began to fade. That discovery shocked him, because it meant one thing: he was not powerless. He had been giving up control too early, every single time. But knowing this did not make it easier, because the moment he tried to resist, the discomfort grew stronger. His mind pushed back harder, flooding him with excuses, telling him he could start later, telling him one break would not matter. And it felt so real, so convincing, that most of the time he still gave in, and each time he did, the same cycle repeated, a few minutes of distraction turning into hours, followed by regret, followed by promises to do better tomorrow. But tomorrow always looked exactly the same, until one afternoon, while walking through a quiet street near his apartment, still carrying that heavy feeling of wasted time, he noticed an old man sitting on a wooden bench, completely still, holding something small in his hands. And what caught Ethan's attention was not the man, but the way he seemed unaffected by everything around him. Cars passed by, people talked loudly, a dog barked nearby, yet the man did not move. His focus remained steady, calm, almost unnatural, and without fully understanding why, Ethan slowed down, then stopped, then finally walked closer, as if something inside him knew that this moment, this simple encounter, was not random at all, and what the old man was holding would soon change the way Ethan saw his own mind forever. The closer Ethan stepped, the more he noticed the small object in the old man's hands. It was a simple candle, its flames steady and quiet despite the breeze that moved through the street. And for a moment Ethan just stood there, watching, confused by how something so fragile could remain so stable in a place so full of movement and noise. The old man slowly looked up, as if he had already noticed Ethan long before he arrived. And with a calm voice he said, "You are not here by accident." The words caught Ethan off guard. He hesitated for a second, then let out a small breath and replied honestly, "I cannot control my focus." The old man did not react with surprise. Instead, he nodded slightly, as if he had heard this many times before. Then he raised the candle a little higher and asked, "Do you see this flame?" Ethan nodded. "It looks simple, but it will disappear the moment you lose control." Ethan frowned slightly, not fully understanding, and the old man continued, "Take it." Without thinking too much, Ethan reached out and carefully held the candle. The warmth of the flame close to his fingers made him instantly aware of how delicate it was. The old man stood up slowly and pointed down the sidewalk. "Walk to the end of the block and come back. Keep the flame alive." Ethan almost laughed. The task sounded too easy, almost pointless, but something in the old man's presence made him take it seriously. So he turned and started walking. At first, everything felt normal. The flame stayed lit, and Ethan thought maybe this was just a strange but simple lesson. But then a gust of wind passed by, not strong, just enough to make the flame flicker, and instantly his attention snapped toward it. His grip tightened, his steps slowed, his mind became alert, and that was when he noticed it, the same thing that always happened when he tried to focus. Thoughts started rushing in, telling him to hurry, telling him to protect the flame, telling him not to fail, and the more he listened, the more unstable his hands became. Another light breeze came, and this time the flame went out, just like that. In less than a second, Ethan stopped walking, staring at the thin line of smoke rising from the wick, a small task, something that should have been easy, yet he failed almost. Immediately, he walked back, feeling a mix of confusion and frustration. "It is just the wind," he said, trying to explain himself, but the old man gently shook his head, took the candle, and relit it, then placed it back into Ethan's hands. "Try again," he said calmly. "But this time, watch your mind, not the flame." Ethan stood there for a moment, unsure what that even meant, but deep down he felt it. This was not about the candle. This was about something much bigger, something he had never truly faced before. And as he turned around for the second attempt, he did not realize that this simple walk would reveal the exact reason he had been losing control of his life all along. This time, Ethan did not rush forward. He stood still for a moment, holding the candle carefully, feeling the warmth of the flame against his fingers, and instead of staring at the flame like before, he turned his attention inward. Just like the old man had said, he began to watch his own mind, and almost immediately, he noticed it again. The thoughts started forming, telling him to move faster, warning him about the wind, reminding him of his last failure, each thought pulling at his attention, trying to take control, and for the first time, Ethan did not follow them. He simply noticed them, like watching clouds pass through the sky. And then he took his first step, slowly, carefully, not because he was afraid of the wind, but because he was aware of what was happening inside him. A light breeze brushed against his face. The flame flickered slightly, and instantly his mind reacted. A surge of urgency, a voice saying, "Protect it. Do not lose it again." His grip tightened, his shoulders stiffened, and the flame shook harder. And right there, Ethan understood something important. The moment he panicked, the moment he reacted without control, everything became unstable. So he paused, took a slow breath, and loosened his grip just a little. The flame steadied, not because the wind stopped, but because he stopped fighting in the wrong way. Step by step, he continued walking, each movement becoming more intentional, each breath more controlled. But the challenge did not disappear. The noise around him grew louder. A car passed by. Music played faintly from somewhere. People walked past him talking, and every sound tried to pull his attention away, just like his phone, just like his thoughts, just like everything that had always distracted him before. And again, his mind reacted, telling him to look, to listen, to break focus. But this time, Ethan saw the pattern clearly. Distraction was not outside. It started inside. And if he gave it attention, it grew stronger. But if he ignored it, Even for a moment, it lost its power. Another stronger gust of wind came. The flame bent sharply, almost going out, and for a split second, fear rushed in. But Ethan did not panic. He adjusted his movement, turned his body slightly, shielded the flame naturally, without tension, without overthinking, and the flame survived, still burning, still steady. And as he kept walking, something inside him began to change. The noise became quieter, not because it disappeared, but because it no longer controlled him. His mind became calmer, clearer, and for the first time in a long time, Ethan felt what true focus was like, not forced, not stressful, but stable, controlled, present. And when he finally reached the end of the block, he stopped, looked at the flame, still alive in his hands, and realized something that hit him harder than any failure he had ever experienced. Every time he lost focus before, it was not because life was too distracting, it was because he never learned how to control the moment his mind started to drift. And now, as he slowly turned back to walk toward the old man, holding the same fragile flame that once went out in seconds, he knew that what he was carrying was no longer just a candle. It was proof that his mind could be trained, and that everything he believed about himself might have been wrong all along. When Ethan returned, the old man did not ask if he succeeded. He simply looked at the candle, still burning steadily in Ethan's hands, and gave a small nod, not impressed, not surprised, just calm. As if this outcome was always expected, Ethan stood there for a moment, feeling something he had not felt in a long time. Not pride, not relief, but clarity, a quiet understanding that something inside him had shifted. It was not the wind, Ethan said slowly, almost speaking to himself. It was me. The old man smiled slightly and gestured for him to sit down on the bench. Tell me what you saw, he said, and Ethan took a deep breath before answering. Every time I lost the flame before, it started with a thought, a small one, but I followed it, and then everything fell apart. The old man nodded. And this time, Ethan continued, I saw the thoughts, but I did not follow them, and the moment I stopped reacting, everything became easier. The old man leaned back slightly, his eyes calm and steady. That is focus, he said, not forcing your attention, but choosing where it goes. Ethan sat in silence, letting the words settle, and for the first time, they made sense, not as an idea, but as something real he had experienced. So I just need to control my thoughts, Ethan said, but the old man shook his head gently. No, he replied. You do not control your thoughts, you control your response to them. Ethan frowned slightly, trying to understand the difference, and the old man continued. Thoughts will always come, just like the wind. You cannot stop them, but you can decide whether they move you or not. Ethan looked down at the candle again, the flame still steady, still alive, and suddenly the lesson became clearer. Every distraction he had ever faced, every moment he lost focus, it was never about the outside world. It was about the moment he gave in to the first impulse, the first urge, the first thought that pulled him away, and once he followed it, everything else followed too, like a chain reaction he never questioned before. So all this time, Ethan said quietly, I was losing control at the very beginning, not at the end. The old man nodded. Exactly, he said. Focus is not built in hours, it is built in seconds, in the moment you decide to stay or leave. Those words stayed with Ethan, repeating in his mind, not as pressure, but as a realization, because it meant something important, something he had never considered before. Change did not require a perfect day or a perfect system. It required a single decision, made over and over again, in the smallest moments. And as Ethan sat there, holding the candle that once went out in seconds but now remained steady in his hands, he realized that what he had learned was not just a trick, not just a lesson for today. It was a skill, something that could change everything if he truly understood how to use it. But deep down, he also knew something else, something the old man had not yet said, that keeping the flame alive on a quiet street was one thing, but keeping it alive in the chaos of real life would be something completely different. The old man slowly stood up and took a step closer to Ethan, his eyes still calm, but now carrying a deeper weight. You are right, he said. Keeping the flame alive here is easy compared to what comes next. Ethan felt a slight tension return to his chest, not fear, But awareness, he knew this was not over. The old man gently took the candle from his hands. Then after a brief moment, handed it back again. But this time his voice was firmer. Now go home, sit at your desk, and do your work. While keeping this flame alive, Ethan blinked in surprise. The task sounded simple, but something about it felt much harder than walking down a quiet street. He nodded without arguing and turned to leave, holding the candle carefully as he made his way back. And with every step, he could already feel the difference. The street had been controlled, predictable, but his room, his habits, his routine, that was where he had failed every single day. When he finally reached his apartment, he placed the candle on his desk and sat down. The same chair, the same laptop, the same space where he had lost hours again and again. But now there was something new, a small flame, steady but fragile, reminding him of what was at stake. He opened his laptop, and almost instantly, the familiar urge returned, stronger than before, telling him to check something, to take a short break, to delay just a little. It felt automatic, like a habit that had been repeating for years, and for a moment, his hand almost moved on its own, reaching toward his phone. But then he saw it. The flame flickered slightly, reacting not to the wind, but to the sudden movement. And in that moment, everything connected. This was the same pattern, the same first thought, the same beginning of losing control. Ethan stopped, pulled his hand back slowly, and shifted his attention inward again. Just like before, he noticed the thought, but he did not follow it, and the urge weakened. Just a little, he took a breath and turned back to his screen, starting the task he had been avoiding for days. The first few minutes were uncomfortable. His mind resisted, throwing more distractions at him, louder, more persistent, trying to break his focus, and each time it happened, he felt the pull, the urge to escape. But now he had something he did not have before, awareness. He could see the moment it started, the exact second his focus began to slip, and instead of reacting, he stayed, again and again, choosing not to follow, choosing to remain. And slowly, something began to change. The noise in his mind became less intense. The urges lost their strength, and his attention became sharper, more stable, like the flame in front of him, still moving, still alive, but no longer out of control. And as minutes turned into longer stretches of uninterrupted focus, Ethan realized something that felt almost unreal. The same environment that once destroyed his concentration was no longer the problem, because for the first time, he was not fighting the world around him. He was training the way he responded to it. And deep inside, he knew this was only the beginning of something much bigger. At first, Ethan believed he had finally figured it out, that all he needed to do was notice his thoughts and stay present, and everything would fall into place. But as the hours passed, something unexpected began to happen. The resistance did not disappear, it adapted. The distractions became quieter, more subtle, no longer loud urges to check his phone, but softer thoughts that sounded reasonable, almost helpful, telling him he had done enough, suggesting he deserved a break, reminding him of something else he could do later. And these thoughts were harder to detect because they did not feel like distractions, they felt like logic. And without realizing it, Ethan followed one of them, just for a moment, just to pause, just to rest his mind. And within minutes, the pattern returned, his focus slipped, his attention drifted, and when he looked back at the candle, the flame was weaker, shaking, barely holding on, a quiet warning that he had lost control again. Ethan leaned back in his chair, frustrated, not because he failed, but because he understood exactly how it happened. It was not the obvious distractions that defeated him, it was the ones that felt justified, the ones that entered his mind without resistance. And that realization changed everything. Because now the challenge was not just about staying focused, it was about seeing through the illusion of his own thoughts, recognizing that not every thought deserved his attention, not every idea deserved action. And as he sat there, watching the flame struggle, he made a different decision. Instead of reacting, instead of judging himself, he simply returned. He adjusted his posture, took a slow breath, and brought his attention back to the task in front of him, not forcing it, not rushing it, just returning, again and again. Each time his mind drifted, and something interesting began to happen. The more he returned, the easier it became, not because the thoughts stopped, but because they lost their authority. They were still there, still appearing, still trying to pull him away. But now they felt weaker, like distant noise instead of commands he had to follow. And the flame in front of him reflected that change. It grew steadier, stronger, not perfect, but stable. And as the hours continued, Ethan noticed something he had never experienced before. Time no longer felt heavy. It no longer dragged or slipped away unnoticed. It moved with him, each moment connected to the next, forming a rhythm he could stay inside without effort. And for the first time, he completed something he had been avoiding, not with stress, not with pressure, but with control, real control, the kind that came from understanding, not force. And when he finally stopped, not because he was distracted, but because he chose to, he looked at the candle again. The flame still alive, still steady. And in that quiet moment, Ethan realized that focus was not about eliminating distractions. It was about becoming someone who could return, no matter how many times the mind tried to wander. And deep down, he knew that this ability, this simple act of returning, was the difference between the person he used to be and the person he was slowly becoming. The next morning, Ethan woke up with a different feeling, not excitement, not motivation, but a quiet sense of responsibility, like he had discovered something real, and now it was up to him to protect it. He sat at his desk again, the candle placed in front of him, its flame steady as always, but today it felt different, not like a test, but like a mirror, reflecting exactly what was happening inside him. He began his work, slowly, carefully, and almost immediately, the same patterns returned. Thoughts appeared, distractions whispered, the urge to escape rose again. But this time, Ethan did not feel surprised. He expected it. He was ready for it. And instead of resisting with frustration, he responded with awareness. Each time his mind drifted, he noticed it, paused, and returned, again and again. And something important began to change. The gap between distraction and awareness became smaller, faster, until the moment he lost focus and the moment he regained it almost merged into one. And that was when Ethan understood something deeper than before. Focus was not about never losing attention. It was about how quickly you come back. And as that realization settled, his confidence grew, not the kind that comes from success, but the kind that comes from control, real control, the kind that does not depend on the environment, the mood, or the situation, but comes from within. And as hours passed, he noticed something else, something even more powerful. The tasks that once felt heavy and overwhelming now felt simple, not because they changed, but because his relationship with them changed. He was no longer trying to escape them. He was fully present with them, and that presence made everything clearer, easier, more manageable. And for the first time, Ethan experienced what it felt like to be fully engaged, fully focused, without force, without tension, just steady, like the flame in front of him. And when he finally stood up, stretching after a long period of uninterrupted work, he looked at the candle again, expecting it to feel like a symbol, but instead, it felt like something else, something smaller, almost unnecessary, because what it represented was no longer outside of him. It was already inside. And later that day, when he returned to the same street, the same bench, the same place where everything started, he noticed something strange. The old man was not there, the bench was empty, the street looked exactly the same, but something was missing, or maybe something was no longer needed. Ethan stood there for a moment, holding the candle in his hand, looking at the empty space where the old man once sat, and slowly, he began to understand. The lesson was never about the man. It was never about the candle. It was about learning how to see, how to notice the moment his mind tried to take control, and how to take it back. And as he stood there in the quiet street, with the wind moving freely around him, he realized something that changed everything. The world had not become calmer. The distractions had not disappeared, but for the first time, they no longer had power over him. And that was the moment Ethan knew that what he had gained was not temporary. It was a skill, something he could carry with him anywhere, into any situation, no matter how chaotic it became. And that understanding marked the beginning of a completely different life. As Ethan stood there holding the candle, he slowly realized that nothing about the world had changed. The wind still moved the same way. The noise still filled the air. Distractions still existed everywhere around him. But something inside him was no longer reacting the same way. And that difference, small as it seemed, was everything. He looked at the flame one last time, steady and quiet, and then gently blew it out, not because he needed it anymore, but because he understood what it had been trying to teach him all along. And as the thin line of smoke faded into the air, a new thought appeared in his mind, but this time he did not follow it blindly. He noticed it, observed it, and chose whether it deserved his attention. And in that simple act, he felt a level of control he had never experienced before. Not control over the world, not control over time, but control over the one thing that had always determined everything else: his response, his awareness, his focus. And as the days passed, this ability followed him into every part of his life. When he sat down to work, the same. Distractions came, but they no longer pulled him away without permission. When he felt the urge to delay, to escape, to avoid discomfort, he saw it clearly, right at the beginning. And in that moment, he made a choice, again and again, not perfectly, not without failure, but with awareness. And each time he returned, each time he chose to stay, his control grew stronger, his mind became steadier, and slowly, the person he used to be began to fade, replaced by someone who could sit, focus, and complete what he started, not because it was easy, but because he no longer surrendered at the first sign of discomfort. And one evening, as he sat at his desk, working through something that once would have overwhelmed him, he paused for a moment, not out of distraction, but out of realization. He understood now that focus was never about forcing yourself to concentrate for hours. It was about mastering the moment your mind tried to leave, because every action begins with a thought, every result begins with a decision, and every life is shaped by what you choose to follow or ignore. And as Ethan looked out the window, watching the world move as it always had, he knew something with complete certainty. The difference between a distracted life and a disciplined one was not talent, not intelligence, not even time. It was the ability to notice, to pause, and to choose. And that ability, once learned, could change everything.